Online for Authors, where I, Terry M. Brown, author of character-driven fiction and host of the podcast, introduce readers to characters they'd love to invite to lunch by interviewing authors, discussing their books, learning about the writing process, and even, on occasion, chatting live with a panel of authors to discuss topics relevant to both readers and writers. My guest today on the Online for Authors podcast is Catherine Butterfield, author of the book The Serpent and the Rose. In my book review, I stated The Serpent and the Rose is a historical fiction work about Marguerite de Valois, the daughter of Catherine de' Medici. Marguerite began life as a French princess, became the Queen of Navarre through marriage, and chose to remove herself from that marriage as her husband became King of France. We follow Marguerite's life through journal entries, allowing us to see her dysfunctional family and the craziness of court life from her point of view. I loved that this was written in first person and in present tense, an unusual point of view for a historical fiction novel, because I became quite attached to Marguerite and her quick wit and dry sense of humor. I typically do not care for books written about this period of time because I get slogged down in the details of a history I can't keep straight and names that mean nothing to me. However, Catherine did an amazing job keeping readers engaged with salient facts, a quick tempo, and dashes of humor. I loved this book and highly recommend it to anyone who loves historical fiction and a good laugh. Today on Online for Authors, I'm chatting with Catherine Butterfield, author of The Serpent and the Rose. Welcome, Catherine.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Well, very excited to have you. I really enjoyed the book.
Good.
But before we get into it, give the listeners just a quick idea of what will they find when they open the pages of The Serpent and the Rose.
They're going to find the diary of a 16th century princess as she tries to make her way through a life filled with jeopardy and war and thwarted love affairs. It's not a romance novel, so I don't want to mislead anyone there. There's a certain amount of sense of humor, too. She's got a pretty wry.
Fantastic. Yes.
Yeah. Pretty wry sense of humor about her lot in life. And it's written because it's written in dates, you can read it in small sections. You know, you can read a few dates and go to sleep and read a few more the next night. Some of my readers have said this is a nice book to read when you don't have a lot of time.
When you don't have a lot of time. Wonderful. So it's a story. The princess is Marguerite de Valois. I never can do that correctly.
I know.
And she's part of the Medici clan.
Yes.
16th century France.
Yes.
What possessed you to go there and say, this is where I want to write a novel?
It was serendipity, really. It was post-pandemic. I had travel lust big time. And I knew I couldn't afford to take a world tour. But I had been researching artist colonies and writers' retreats, and I found one in Nerac, France, which is in the southwest of France. And I applied and told them, at that point, I had no idea what I was going to write about, but I told them my background as a writer and that I was hoping to be inspired, and was accepted. So grateful.
Wow.
And so I went to this place. It was very bare bones. You practically sleep on a mattress on the floor. And there were other artists there. A lot of them were, working with their hands. I think I was the only writer during that period. And he took us out to dinner. One of our hosts took us out to dinner one night, and we were dining right next door to this crumbling edifice. It was a chateau. It had been partially reconstructed. The rest of it was a mess. And he said, this is where the King of France lived before he was the King of France. He was the King of Navarre. And he lived there with his wife, Marguerite de Valois, who was the Princess of France. And I thought, well, that's pretty interesting. Tell me more. And he said, these two, there were apparently a lot of rambunctious behavior in this chateau when they lived there. In fact, they were so famous for a lot of the romantic escapades that went on that William Shakespeare wrote Love's Labour's Lost about them. Well, I used to be a Shakespearean actress in my previous life.
Okay.
And this really sparked my imagination. So initially I started researching Henry because he ended up being King of France. He sounded pretty interesting. Very soon, however, I got detoured into becoming fascinated with Marguerite because she had written her memoirs. She was the first woman to ever write and publish her memoirs. And they're very difficult they're not actually that difficult to find. I actually found them online through the Gutenberg press, and they're translated, and they're a little bit difficult to, it's archaic language.
Right, exactly.
But I got a real feeling for who she was. I was sort of reading between the lines. And I believe I sensed a certain tension between her and her mother, Catherine de Medici. And I believe I sensed a certain, love affair here and there. And I definitely got the sense that this was not a great marriage that she was in. And also she told some wonderful stories about her travels. So I thought this could be, initially I thought to myself, this should be a movie and I should write it as a screenplay because I have a background writing screenplays. And I thought I should do that. I actually sort of structured it while I was in Nerac. Nerac is the town,
right,
as a screenplay, and pitched it to. At the end of the stay there, you're supposed to show what you've accomplished, and I pitched it to the other people, and they were fascinated and could see it as a movie. But soon I started thinking about, did I really want to have another screenplay sitting in my garage for a film that has not been made?
Right.
Is this really the way I want to go with this? No, I thought, I want this to be a novel, and I had never written one before. But I really wanted other people to read this. This woman is fascinating. In addition to her being a charming person, she was unfairly maligned in her day. And there was all sorts of pamphlets disseminated calling her, debauched and corrupt and all sorts of horrible things for many political reasons. And I thought, even now, when you look her up, the things written about her that are not very nice. And I thought, I want to clear her name. I'm getting a real sense of who she is. And a lot of women, as I'm sure you know, a lot of women through history have had their names either erased completely or have been completely sullied. Their reputations have been sullied for reasons we can only guess at.
Right. Because they didn't have the power, other people did, so they could say what they wanted, and the women were left to suffer with it.
That's right. And history is told by the victors, and the victors are frequently men.
Exactly.
So there you go.
Well, first of all, there were many things that I loved about this book. One of them was that it was first person, present tense, which is so rare in a historical fiction novel. Historical fiction tends to be past tense, third person, and it was just very refreshing. And I felt like I knew her right away. Like I was just invited into her life, which was wonderful.
Oh, that's excellent.
And what is really great, Catherine, is I'm probably not your reader normally, because this century, 16th century France, does nothing for me. Okay, now I know some people are like enthralled with it. It is not me. I get so confused with who's in power now and all of these names and all the inbreeding, and everyone's named Henry, and I get very confused. And I just, I just do, and I find it to be tedious.
Everyone's named Henry. That's so true.
That's true. Henry VIII. We got Henry the 472nd. I mean, that's the way it feels. And I don't know. I tend to find it tedious.
So I hear you.
So I picked it up.
I would never have picked this subject
Okay.
They'd stayed in America, you
Okay,
know?
so when I picked it up, I thought, well, I'm going to give it, I'm going to definitely read this and see what I think, and I'm going to be honest. And I was only maybe 2 little sections in, and it was like, okay, so I love this. In fact, I contacted you. I wasn't even done reading yet.
Oh, wow.
I said, well, I already know I love it, and I'll be done with it in the next 2 days. And so I'm going to go ahead and get her set up for this because I just knew, wow, I love this. So I think that's a really good testament to your writing style
Thank you so much.
because it is not a historical period of time that usually like grabs my attention. So good job
Yes,
with
and
that.
I completely sympathize with that. Doing the research for it was really difficult because people's names change in addition to everything else.
Yes.
Suddenly somebody who used to be a duke is now a count, or they've changed entirely. They've gotten a new region and now that's their name. And the Duke de Conde or the Prince of Conde, will die and there'll be a new one. And you're like, oh, is that the same guy or
Same
what?
guy. Who are we talking about now?
Yeah.
Right. Right. Which is one of the reasons why I'm often reading books of that era. And it's like, oh, I don't even know who we're talking about anymore. I don't even know what's going on.
I have the
And
same problem.
so, yeah. I thought it was funny. There were 3 Henrys, which is why Henry came to my mind, but there were 3 Henrys in your book right off in the beginning, which did concern me briefly because I thought I'm never going to keep them straight. And I love how you did it. You have Catherine in her diary give them all different names.
Marguerite, you mean?
Yeah. Oh, that's what I meant. Marguerite.
Yeah.
Marguerite, give them all different names. And so she gives the Henry that she's currently in love with is Henry. And then everyone else has a different name. Well, later she falls in love with a different Henry, and now he becomes Henry, and everybody else has a different name. And it made me laugh because I was able to keep up with who was who. But she
That's
seemed
right.
to see that she had the same problem that I have. There's too
Right.
many Henrys. What are we going to do about this?
What are we going to do about this?
Yes.
I figure if you're going to deal with it head on.
Yeah. Yeah. And I really loved that. So now I'm curious. She has a very blunt sense of humor. I laughed out loud many times. I have several places highlighted because it was like that line is just precious beyond belief. I love that. Is this Marguerite or is this Catherine?
Well, I'd say it's an amalgam. It's definitely an amalgam. I sense a wit within her that was a 16th century wit.
Right.
And a sparkling intelligence. And I thought, but I did bring a certain modern sensibility to her, I would say. I'm not sure that she, in her day, would say something like, why are men necessary?
Which is one of the lines that I have underlined, and I laughed so hard. Why exactly are men necessary? And another one was like, are men just stupid? And I thought, oh my gosh, this is so funny.
I had a hairdresser who read the book, and when I arrived, she had it underlined, and she said, do you really feel this way? And I said, well, Marguerite feels that way.
Yes. It's like I can hide behind that, right? No, I found the sense of humor to be very refreshing. And her way of looking at her lot in life. So you think, okay, well, she's a princess, life must be fabulous. And in her period of life, she loses people she loves. She's locked away in a castle as a prisoner on multiple occasions and always by her family. It's not even like it's some other warring factor has come in. It's her own mother and it's her own brother, and they lock her up and don't let her out. People try to kill her. They say horrible things about her, and yet she seems to have just a very, well, this is the way life is for a princess kind of attitude.
Right. She's not happy about it.
No, but she, instead of, like falling onto the floor in a fetal position, she just kind of says, well, this is kind of what you expect to have happen. And off she moves. It's very, I don't know. It's just a very funny, I found it to be very funny, which I found surprising because for that era, I typically find them to be a little bit stiff and I don't know, lackluster. And this one was none of that.
that I don't actually consider myself a historical fiction writer, so that might be part of it.
Okay.
It's the first time I've ever written a novel. It's the first time I've ever dealt with historical fiction. So I was tackling this from the point of view of a person who was really kind of trying to make it palatable to modern day audiences in a way. I agree with you. I have read some books about people that I can't even get through them because
Right.
it's just too much trivia, arcane knowledge that I didn't really need. I just want to get to the meat of this thing.
You feel like you're kind of slogging through, right?
Yes.
So you say you don't consider yourself a historical fiction author. What do you consider yourself?
Well, for most of my life, I've been a playwright.
Okay.
And I have written about historical periods. I adapted a Trollope novel, but I've never tackled a historical issue, and certainly not in a novel. And I've always thought of being a novel writer as being the final frontier. That I always assumed I would never be able to do it because in the novels I read a lot of British novels growing up. I was really into Jane Austen and Edith Wharton. And I just assumed one needed to know a lot more than I knew about anything, particularly the names of trees, foliage,
right,
bird song.
right.
I learned in this modern age, you can find out the names of trees and they're not even that necessary. I'm always interested in character. I'm interested in people, what's going on inside them. How people are manipulating people, how people escape manipulation. That interests me more than whether it's a birch or an oak tree.
And you and I are very similar in that way. I have written 3 historical fiction from one is 1970, one is World War II, one is 1890. So I don't stick in the same place.
Wow.
But I don't consider myself a historical fiction writer. I consider myself a character-driven fiction author. And I tell people that wherever I happen to put my character, if you love a good character, then you'll want to read what I've written because it's about the character. They have to have a setting.
I've got to read you. That sounds great.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. But I say, they have to have a setting. And so I put them somewhere. And if this particular character tells me they need to be in the 1890s mountains of North Carolina, that's where I'm putting them.
Wow.
And so, yeah.
What's the 1970s one about?
Oh, it's actually set in the Ukraine. And what's crazy is that that book came out 4 weeks before the current Ukrainian crisis.
Oh my gosh. That's
it was very just like crazy. But
wow.
Yeah, so I think that in terms of your author, like being a novelist, you sound like maybe character-driven fiction is more, it's less of a genre and more of a how you go about deciding what you're going to write. And it's about characters. And so for you, Marguerite caught your attention.
She definitely did. I mean, it helped so much to read her memoirs, to just get the feeling of this woman. And as you were reading it, realize, well, this isn't the slut they've been talking about. This isn't crazed lunatic they've all called her. This is an amazing woman. She spoke 5 languages.
I saw that. And like one of them, she was concerned one of them was not English, but she had all these other languages. And I'm thinking, wow, that's pretty impressive.
It's interesting. English was not that useful a language back then.
Right. Of course it is now, but
it's the big language, but then it was an extra one that you might learn for fun.
So first of all, I learned a lot. I learned a lot about the history, which was really good, but I also learned little tidbits, and I have to know this one in particular. I'm going to read from the book. It says, there has been a change in the rules of the game of chess recently, which have increased the queen piece's powers. She can now move as far as she wants in any direction. He keeps forgetting this, and it drives him mad. I, however, find it a very welcome change. And I laughed so hard because I can just imagine that there's a queen in power somewhere who has decided that this queen can do what she wants. Is that really true? Did they actually change the chess game?
They did. I looked that up. I mean, I came across that piece of information and thought, well, this is perfect. I don't know who initiated it, but I was looking up the rules of chess, and the queen became more powerful at one point.
And so in my mind, I'm immediately like, I'm thinking, wow, that needs to be the book. Like, we need to go find out which queen did this. Because obviously there was someone who was in power who just decided they were sick and tired of not being able to do what they wanted. And in the game of chess, the queen gets to be everywhere.
I didn't really do a deep dive onto who initiated that. Now I want to.
Yeah, so that was one of the things. So that was interesting. So I felt like I learned things. In addition to learning things, there were some pieces of wisdom that I saw. One of them in particular was adversity is solitary, whilst prosperity dwells in a crowd.
That is literally a quote from Marguerite de Valois.
Is it really?
Yes, she actually said that. Yes.
And I loved that idea because there's a lot of modern day quotes that are very similar, which is, that idea of, your friends essentially stand right behind you.
They're when everybody loves you. Nobody loves you when you're down and out.
Right.
I think it's the phrase now.
Exactly. So that's great. So that actually came from her memoir. She,
in addition to her memoir, she wrote a great deal and was quoted a great deal because she was an intellectual in her day. She held soirees. And so I'm not exactly sure if that was in the memoirs or somewhere
or
else.
One of her other written works.
Yeah.
Okay. That was really interesting.
Yeah,
and then there were countless times that I laughed out loud. Absolutely laughed out loud. And one of them was she's talking about her husband, the king, and they have gotten back together. Like, they'd been separated. They're now, he's got sick. She has, been with him, and she's talking about him, and she said she's rather glad about that. And then she says, even if he is a thoughtless dolt, whom I could occasionally like to shove down the stairs, such I suspect is the nature of marriage. And I laughed. Yes, it was. And I just thought, isn't that true? I mean, I love my husband dearly. I'm so thankful for him. And there are times where I can understand that feeling.
Well, and especially Henry says terrible things. He's expecting for her to sympathize with his trying to acquire another mistress,
Right. He has no sense whatsoever, and he just says the most horrible things. But there was just something, I could hear her voice. I could just hear it in my head. Such is the nature of marriage.
I have a feeling that's something she probably said at some point.
I have a feeling that it was definitely close.
Yeah. You can actually Google her and look up her quotes. There's some wonderful ones that I didn't use.
Oh, wow. I'll definitely do that. Thank you. What was there? So I'm sure with all of the stuff that she wrote, there has to be things that you learned about her that did not make the book.
Oh, yes. I learned one of the things that didn't make the book so much is that she was inordinately concerned with being in favor with the crown.
Okay.
There was just a lot of writing about, they like me, they don't like me, I'm in favor, I'm out favor. I didn't really admire that side of her that seemed preoccupied with it. But then again, it's a survival instinct. If you're not in favor with the crown, you can end up locked up in a castle somewhere. So
or beheaded or
all sorts of things.
Right.
And so, and there was a little bit of kind of, I wouldn't say bitchery, but, court, just the whole intrigues of court life, I didn't get that. I wasn't that fascinated with that stuff, who was doing
who was, where they all were and why, right?
Yeah.
Right.
But that side of her personality it seemed, am I popular?
Right.
It was, I kind of dialed that down a little because, I made it more about, will I survive this?
Right.
Which I feel is kind of a bigger issue.
And may very well have been what she was driving at when she was worried about her popularity. Exactly. And so we'll give her the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of nitpicking amongst people about, who said what and what places who on top of what. And, it was very cliquish and
Yes.
kind of high school.
Yeah. Well, and I thought the same thing several times reading and hearing about, like who was in and who was out and who said what. And now you can't leave the castle. And
yeah,
I was just like, I wouldn't have done well.
Well, I don't think any of us would have.
No.
And because your life is literally in jeopardy all the time.
I don't
know you can stand that kind of pressure.
Well, and not only that, you don't even know who to trust.
Right.
You're called in to talk to your brother, the king. And is he being your brother or is he being the king? And is the king currently for you or against you? And all of those things, I think it would be very.
And by the way, those brothers really were as different as portrayed,
Right.
She had 3 brothers in a row become king, and they were very different people. I focused more on Charles and the one who went to and Anjou.
Anjou, yeah.
Who was quite a colorful character.
He was colorful. Yes, he was.
Yes. He actually had his court of Mignon, and they had orgies galore, and the court itself, the main court that had been there before they arrived, was very homophobic and Catholic. You just didn't do this stuff, and he engendered a lot of distrust and hatred. But it was important to me to have Marguerite more indulgent. I'm sorry he had to start dressing as a man again. He looked so beautiful in those dresses.
In those dresses. And I thought that was another funny line. There were just a lot of really good, very good lines that made me chuckle.
Oh, I'm so glad.
So, it was
the goal.
I kept thinking this is a very humorous historical fiction. This is great. I'm having a great time with this. I felt like in the end I understood the era a little better, and I felt like I got to know her.
Yeah.
And I suspect that although that she has more written about her than a lot of people, as you said, it isn't necessarily the truth.
Yes.
And so I feel like I got to know a little more of who she really was, as opposed to what these pamphlets have said.
It's funny. There really isn't that much written about her. There's what she's written.
Right.
And then you can dig up these pamphlets. And then if you go to the encyclopedias, they seem to have the party line on who she was. But when I mention her to people, people are like, who?
Who?
Now, everybody knows Catherine de Medici.
Right.
She's just famous for being such a Machiavellian, manipulator.
Right.
And for being Italian, in a French court.
Right.
But not very many people know about her. So I found myself very lucky having stumbled across her.
Yeah, I think isn't it amazing how that happens, where we are somewhere learning something, seeing something, doing something, and a character just kind of comes to you and says, I'm the one.
Oh, it's so funny you should say that, because I really felt her presence while I was there. I mean, I would walk through the park that she herself designed, and I would, look at you can brush away some stones and see ancient Roman tiles from way before her time. And you just get a kind of a frisson, because you're thinking, I'm looking at this, and she looked
at this. Right.
And it was a long time ago for her too. I really felt like she was kind of with me.
I love that feeling. And I like that feeling. It even happens to me on characters that I've made up completely, where all of a sudden they're real to me, and they're living in my head.
Yeah.
And I tell people all the time, my characters are just like born in my head. Yes. And now at that point, then they start telling me their story, and now I have to write it. I've got to get it out. So,
yes.
But
when it's going well.
Yes. When it's going well. When it's not, it's a little harder. So how long did it take you to get this out? Get the story out, and then actually then get it polished up? Because I know the two are very different.
The two are very different. I got the first skeleton of it out in a month.
Okay.
Which I know is ridiculously short. But it really was just the skeleton. It was where I wanted. I had no meat on its bones. And it had a lot of, jumbled information and stuff. But I knew my beginning, I knew my middle, and I knew my end. And then it took another year to flesh it out and give it substance,
Right.
and make it a real thing. But it was, the framework of it came together pretty quickly, I think, because I plotted it out first as a movie.
Okay.
So I had my acts in place, and they made it fairly easy to go from, first she's going to be here, then she's going to take the trip through Flanders, then she's going to, come back, then she's going to meet Jean Dalbray, not Jean Dalbray, Jean Dobiac, and then she's, terrible things are going to happen.
Right. So you say that she hinted at love affairs. And, one of the big things in the book, I think I can talk about the fact that she, falls in love with one of the stable
master.
Yes. Master, which of course is totally unheard of at that time. A princess does not fall in love with the stable master. That does not happen.
You don't do that.
Right. But is that your imagination? Was that a real piece of information? Okay.
That was a real thing.
Okay.
He was real. What happened to him was real, which I won't go into here.
Right. No.
And the only thing that may not be real is he may not have been her one great love. In fact, it's clear he was not her one great love, because there are other lovers mentioned by other writers.
Okay.
So who claim that this person, and it's normally someone from within the court,
okay,
was her great love affair. She got around,
Yeah, well,
it's clear she got around, but they judged her for it, and he was worse than anybody.
Yeah, her husband was just like he was taking lovers left and right. In fact, he was
moved.
Yeah, and that was fine. It was always okay for the man to do so, and not okay for the woman. So.
It was beyond okay. It was admirable.
Yes,
they called him le ver galant, which meant in English it's sort of like the old spark, the guy who keeps on going. In fact, in Iraq, there's actually a restaurant still called Le Ver Galant after him. So
yeah, and that's allowed, and she's considered this horrible, shameful whore of a woman.
Yes,
right,
exactly.
And she's doing absolutely nothing different than he's doing, but she's shameful, and
he
on the other hand, right?
Yeah, great. Oh, gee, a double standard, hard to believe.
I can't even imagine. I've never seen such a thing.
How times have changed.
Yes. Oh my. So beyond history and a good story, which you have both in this, what do you hope readers walk away with?
Well, I'm so glad you got a good laugh out of it, because that's always a goal for me. To be entertained and educated along the way is what I always go for, even in my plays. Is you learn a little something, you feel a little something, you laugh from time to time. Even I wrote a play about cancer that has a lot of humor in it. It's just, I feel that laughter makes the whole thing go down so much easier, right. And it also gives you a sense of your person, the intelligence of your person. If you can make jokes about life, I just feel like you've got a perspective that other people don't have.
Right.
And that's cool.
I love that.
My big goal too. I always said my big goal. This may not be a million seller. It might be 100 seller, but it's already done a little better than that. But I just want my friends to have it on their bedside table. I wanted them to have a tangible thing on their bedside table that they could be, I think I'll read Catherine's book,
Right.
That's all I really wanted.
There is something really awe-inspiring about getting, how did you feel when you got your author copy of the book?
So thrilled. Just weren't you?
Oh my gosh.
Like
I held it to my chest.
Yes.
And then I'd look at it and have my name on the top, and I'd read my name and I'd think, oh, and I'd hold it to my chest again.
It was like that with my first play too. Samuel French is one of the big play publishers, and it was that way. But this was even more, because I designed the book cover and I designed, so much of it.
Yeah.
And I actually wrote the little map myself. I made that little map
Well,
myself.
look at you. Look at you go.
It just felt like a great accomplishment.
So something that, let's go back just a minute. The title,
Mm-hmm.
The Serpent and the Rose. Why? Where did that come from?
Well, she was notorious. The nickname for her was the Serpent Queen.
Okay.
From Catherine de Medici. And Marguerite adores roses. And in the moment, one of the most dangerous moments in her existence, when she's right next to the man she loves, there's the inexplicable scent of roses in the air. And so I've made the point a few times that roses are her emblem. So that's why. Now, since then, I've discovered that it's not the most original title. There are a couple of, but there are a million books with the same titles. So.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I've got a friend who has a book, and she was so disappointed because she got it out there. And when you go on Amazon, there's like 37 of them with that name.
Oh my goodness.
Because it's called The Lighthouse.
Oh, well, yeah, that's Virginia Woolf.
Yes. And so it's made me think about, wow, when I'm naming my book, I really need to think about what else is out there and what I'm in competition with that name. Because
it's funny, I had done a search and didn't find this. There's really just,
I think there's one other that I noticed. Yeah.
Unfortunately, her name is Catherine too. So sorry. But hers is part of a trilogy or something. I'm sorry for all this noise. How do you make that?
That's all right.
So, I chose it. I liked it. It resonated with me.
Right.
And,
well,
there's.
I agree. I was just curious where the name came from because you never really see, like it. Sometimes in a book, you'll see where the line is and you'll know, oh, that's where the title came from. And this was more of an implied.
Yes.
And
I'm not sure even if in the body of the book, if we use the phrase the Serpent Queen for Catherine.
I'm not sure that you do. I believe in the author notes.
Yeah.
In the author notes somewhere.
Yeah. Probably would have done me good to maybe mention that.
No, I was just, like I said, I wanted to kind of bring forth why it was called that. What are you doing next, Catherine? And please tell me that you're going to keep writing novels.
Okay. I would love to. I'm not sure exactly what it's going to be, though.
Okay.
What I'm doing at the moment is I'm writing the screenplay. I'm envisioning it as a miniseries.
Okay.
Like maybe a 10 episode thing.
Okay.
And just for myself, I'm writing the pilot episode. Just to show how that would go in case I get the opportunity and somebody says, you know what, this would be a good miniseries.
Would be.
Yes, in fact.
Yes, in fact. Let me show you what I can do with that. Yeah, no, that would be great. Okay.
But I'm also, it's funny because I'm also a little bit interested in Jeanne d'Albret. Do you remember that character? She's the mother of Henry.
Yes.
Who was a fervent Catholic until a monk converted her. And she had a terrible husband as well. And had to be dragged kicking and screaming up the aisle to marry him, as a matter of fact, according to history. And I thought she might be an interesting person to explore. Catherine de Medici has kind of been done by a lot of people. There's even a TV series called The Serpent Queen. Jeanne d'Albret, I don't think too many people know that much about her. If I were to write another historical novel, or not, I don't know.
You don't know. So a new character has not jumped into your head and demanded attention at this point.
No, and when she does, or he, I will know. It's, I don't know about you, but I feel like a little bit like the stock market. If you look at it as a technical trader, there's a thing called the cumulative period where the stocks just kind of go and they just hang there. And then all of a sudden,
something happens. Yes.
Something happens. And I feel like I'm in the cumulative period right now. I don't exactly know where I'm going.
Yeah.
But I figure it usually comes up.
I tell people that I'm percolating like coffee.
There you go.
That there's little ideas, they're bouncing around. I read things in the news and I wonder what I could maybe do with that. I read a new word and I think, oh, that's interesting. I wonder where that came from. And then something goes from somewhere. And then all of a sudden it's like,
boing,
boing. And it usually for me comes in the form of a character, way more than a plot. It's usually a character that like opens up, and then that character starts, I don't know, just like sending me little vibes here and there until there's enough of something going on that I say I need to now start writing this.
That's what happens to me. Exactly. Yeah. So I'm guessing you're not the kind of person who forces yourself to sit down every morning and write.
No, I don't like it. It doesn't work for me. Nope. Now I will tell you though that recently, so my life is crazy right now. My husband 2 years ago was diagnosed with brain cancer, and I'm his primary caregiver. And then a few weeks ago, he had a stroke, which has left him wheelchair bound at the moment, though they feel pretty confident he'll get past this. But the stroke was caused from the radiation that they had to do for the chemo. I mean, it just is crazy. And I have had a really tough time finding my voice again. Part of it is I don't even know when to sit down to do it.
Yeah.
And part of it is my brain is just like fried at the moment.
Totally get that.
Well, I had started thinking I had a work in progress about 20,000 words in, and I started thinking about it again. And it was like, oh, good. This is good. This is me getting ready to write. And I thought, when am I going to do it?
Yeah.
Well, Women Fiction Writers Association, the women get together and they have these write-ins, and they have them every day, different hours of the day. And you go in on Zoom and you just kind of check in and say, I'm here. They set a timer for 90 minutes. At the end of the 90 minutes, you tell them, okay, this is what I did.
Wow. Is everybody, can you see everybody else writing? Or?
Well, no, you can if you want to leave your camera on, but most people just put their picture up there. And you're just writing at the same time, all these other writers are, and then you come back together and you kind of pat each other on the back for having done what you said you were going to do.
Do you talk about what you wrote, or do you?
You can a little bit, but most of the time you just say, oh, I got new words. It's feeling really good. And then you just move on. But there's something
sense of community.
Yes. And I thought, okay, well, I'm going to try it. And I doubt that I'm going to like it because I don't like people telling me what to do and when to do it. And this feels way too much like you must write. But I sat down, and I think for me right now, knowing that I have dedicated this little space that if I can sit and write, it's working for me right now. It's not my normal way of writing, and I've only been doing it a week, and I don't know how long it'll last and feel good. But for right now, it's at least got me moving again. So
you can actually say, I'm setting aside this time.
Yeah.
And these other people expect me to be there.
Yes, I think part of it is for me the expectation of I'm supposed to show up.
Yeah.
Like I've written it in my calendar, and there are other people now who know that I'm planning to come.
Right. Yes. That's important, isn't it?
And it's helping me
down.
Right. It's helping me at the moment. Like I said, I don't know how long that will last because I tell people that I do more of a word vomit, where I just let it all out, and that I tend to do it like a drunk person who goes on a bender where I just, write and write and write and write and write and write and write. And then I don't write anything for a while because I don't have anything left. That's my normal style.
That's great. And then you go in and you tool it.
Then I go in and I have to fix it all. But that's how I kind of get out the story on paper. I just don't have that kind of time right now.
Yeah.
So I've had to really shift what I'm doing to fit what I can do. And it's kind of crazy. So
sounds like you found an answer for now.
At least for now. Yeah. Definitely.
That's so your husband though.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you. So Catherine, if someone wanted to get in touch with you and chat with you a little bit about Marguerite or what's coming up, or to talk with you about, for instance, my thought is how do you write a screenplay? How do they do that? How do they get up with you?
Well, I have a website. And I'm fairly certain you can reach out to me through that. I get things occasionally. It's www.catherinebutterfield.com.
Super. That'll be in the show notes.
Yeah. And I think it goes straight to my email account.
Yeah.
So that should be fine.
Fantastic. there anything you wish we had talked about that I didn't bring up, Catherine?
Oh, I just wanted to mention that there's an audio book out, which I recorded myself.
Ooh, how fun.
Yes.
Was that a difficult chore?
Initially it was, because technically there was a lot I had to learn. And I had friends who do voiceover work who helped me, like how to set up the space, how to use Audacity, which is the program you use, which outlet you want to send it to. It's pretty much everywhere now. But then once I got into it, man, it was really, because I'm an old actress,
Right. So you like that portion of it.
I really liked voicing her. And then she talks about a lot of, there's dialogue with people from other countries. So I had to do a Spanish accent, an Italian accent, Belgian, and I wasn't that fabulous at it, but I thought, well, this is Marguerite's version of how they sounded. So I don't have to be perfect.
You don't, right.
Like when she tells her mother, talks like her mother, she's probably giving a little bit of spin on it because it drives her crazy,
Right. Exactly. I love that. That is fantastic. Well, that's excellent. I'm glad that's out. Wonderful. Well, Catherine, I want to thank you so much for being with me today.
Oh, it was a pleasure, Terry. Thank you. I'm looking forward to reading one of your books. Now I'm going to
thank you so much. All right. Thank you. Thank you for listening to Online for Authors, where I, Terry M. Brown, author of character-driven fiction and host of the podcast, introduce readers to characters they'd love to invite to lunch. Tune in next Tuesday for another podcast episode.